They delayed my promotion for 3 years as punishment. But when HR opened the investigation file I secretly started, everything changed. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. My name's Lauren Hayes, and for nearly 8 years, I gave everything to the company I worked for. Late nights, skipped weekends, and the kind of loyalty that makes your friends question your sanity. I started as an assistant project coordinator at a logistics firm in Denver and clawed my way up to managing multi-million-dollar shipments. Everyone, including my regional director, said I was next in line for a promotion. It wasn't just a step up. It was the acknowledgement that all those sleepless nights meant something. Then, during one Monday meeting, Martin Crane, my boss, called me into his office. He was smiling that fake, managerial smile that never reached his eyes. "Lauren," he said, "we've decided to go in a different direction for the senior manager position. You're not quite ready." I remember blinking at him, waiting for a punchline. Instead, he gestured to Bryce, the new guy, the one who'd been here for barely a year. Bryce grinned, clueless about the knife Martin had just twisted. It wasn't that I wasn't ready. It was because 6 months earlier, I reported a safety violation on one of our warehouse sites. A forklift nearly tipped because someone ignored the maintenance schedule. That someone was Martin. When I filed the report, he called me into his office the next day and said, "You think you're helping, but you're making waves. Be careful what you draw attention to." Now I knew exactly what he meant. When I asked him why Bryce got the job, he leaned back in his chair, hands folded like a smug professor. "Consider this a lesson in loyalty, Lauren. Maybe next year." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my face blank. Arguing with him would have been like arguing with a brick wall. Only the wall might have had more empathy. That evening, I sat in my car in the empty parking lot long after everyone left. The glow from the office windows made everything look artificial, like the whole place was pretending. My hands shook as I unlocked my phone, scrolling through old work messages, old promises. "Next cycle. You're a top candidate. We value your leadership." Lies. All of them. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there and opened my notes app. Title: If They Ever Ask. I started writing down everything: dates, comments, who said what, who got what raise, every little thing I'd let slide before. It wasn't revenge yet. It was survival. When I finally drove home, it hit me. Martin thought he'd silenced me. But all he'd really done was light the match. After the promotion was taken from me, I noticed things at work slowly changing. Martin started treating me like I was invisible unless he wanted something done. His new favorite, Bryce, walked around acting like he was my boss. Tasks that used to be shared were suddenly handed only to me. He'd smile and say things like, "Lauren, you're so good at multitasking, you won't mind taking this one too." It was always more work, longer hours, and no credit. At first, I thought it might pass. Maybe Martin would realize I was still a good employee. But it only got worse. Dana from HR, who used to be friendly, started avoiding me. She'd give me paperwork at the last minute, then pretend she'd sent it earlier. When I missed a deadline once because of that, she told Martin I was becoming sloppy. I overheard her once saying to Bryce, "Martin just wants to toughen her up." Toughen me up, that's what they called it. I called it punishment. They began giving me the hardest clients, the ones no one else wanted. Angry, impatient people who expected miracles. I worked through lunch breaks, late into the night, and still they said I wasn't doing enough. When I finished one impossible project, Martin told me, "Don't expect a medal for doing your job." He didn't even look up from his computer. Team meetings turned into public shows. Martin loved those. One morning, as we sat in the glass conference room, he joked, "Let Lauren's delay be a reminder to all of us to play nice with authority." Everyone laughed, even the ones who used to defend me. I sat there with my notebook open, pretending to take notes. My face felt hot, but I smiled anyway. That's what they wanted, to see if I'd break. When the meeting ended, I went back to my desk and kept my eyes on the screen. I typed emails until my fingers hurt just to look busy. Bryce passed behind me, patted my chair, and said, "Cheer up, Lauren. It's just business." I wanted to tell him business doesn't look like cruelty dressed up as jokes, but I stayed quiet. That night, I didn't go straight home. I stopped by a cafe, ordered a coffee, and opened my laptop. I created a new folder and named it Work Docs. Inside, I started saving everything. Every email, message, and screenshot that showed what was really happening. I wrote short notes about conversations, dates, and people involved. Nothing emotional, just facts. It felt strange, almost sneaky, but it gave me a small sense of control. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. They gave me extra reports, claimed I volunteered for late shifts, and excluded me from meetings I used to lead. I knew they were trying to wear me down, so I'd quit. But quitting would mean they won. So I smiled, nodded, and said sure to everything. Then I quietly documented it all. Once, I caught Martin looking at me during a meeting with that same smug grin. It was like he was testing how much I could take. I met his eyes and said nothing. Inside, I told myself, keep going. Don't give them what they want. Every night, after finishing my work, I'd update my journal. Just plain notes about what happened that day. Who said what, how they twisted my words, what files disappeared from the shared drive. I didn't know exactly what I was building, but I knew it mattered. Each detail felt like a brick in something solid, something that might one day protect me. I stopped waiting for them to see my worth. I started planning for the day someone else would. Even though the workload never got easier, I kept doing everything they gave me. I stopped expecting fairness and just focused on being good at what I did. If they wanted to bury me in projects, I'd make sure every one of them was perfect. My clients noticed. They sent messages thanking me, copied higher management on their emails, and praised my attention to detail. It was strange. The harder they tried to break me, the better my results became. When regional directors visited our branch, they complimented my work. One of them even said, "Lauren, your numbers are the best we've seen this quarter." Martin forced a smile and said, "She's dependable. We're still helping her grow." I could tell he hated hearing them praise me. The more recognition I got from outside his circle, the tighter he tried to hold the reins. Weeks passed, and I thought maybe all my effort would eventually speak for itself. But when I asked about the promotion again, Martin gave the same line he'd used before. "Still under review, Lauren. These things take time." I'd heard that excuse so many times it sounded like a recording. I nodded and left his office, but inside I knew something was off. That's when I started noticing small things that didn't add up. Reports I submitted would come back changed. Notes I'd written disappeared from shared folders. At first, I thought it was just system errors or someone editing by mistake. But it kept happening. Too specific, too frequent. One afternoon, my coworker Tessa stopped by my desk. She was quiet, serious, one of the few people who didn't laugh at Martin's jokes. She glanced around before whispering, "Can we talk somewhere private?" We went to the break room, empty except for the hum of the fridge. She looked nervous, like she was afraid someone might walk in. "Lauren," she said softly, "you need to know something. They've been changing your reviews." I frowned. "What do you mean changing?" "Dana and Martin," she continued. "They're rewriting your evaluations before they're sent to corporate. They make you look inconsistent, like you can't handle leadership tasks." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "How do you know?" She hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from her notebook. It was a copy of my most recent review. My name was on it, but the comments didn't sound like anything I'd seen before. There were made-up mistakes, words like lacks initiative, struggles with team management. And at the bottom, my signature. Except I'd never signed it. My hands shook slightly as I read it again. I knew my own handwriting, and this wasn't it. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "I found it in the printer," she said. "Dana must have forgotten to shred it. Please be careful. They're covering their tracks." I thanked her quietly, though I didn't know what to say. My chest felt heavy, but not from sadness. It was something sharper, the realization that this wasn't just about keeping me from moving forward. They were trying to erase me completely. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the fake review spread out in front of me. I stared at that forged signature for a long time. The anger I felt wasn't loud, it was cold, steady. I'd always believed hard work spoke for itself, but now I understood that in some places, truth needed proof and protection. I slid the paper into a folder with the rest of my saved files and locked it away. If they wanted to rewrite my story, they'd soon find out I'd been keeping the real one all along. The annual company retreat was supposed to be a celebration, a weekend where everyone could relax after a tough quarter. It was held at a resort just outside Colorado Springs, with polished conference rooms and fake smiles everywhere. I went because not showing up would have looked worse, but I already knew how it would go. Martin loved these events. They gave him a stage. On the second night, during the awards dinner, Martin walked up to the microphone, drink in hand. He started talking about leadership and team dedication, the usual corporate buzzwords. Then he called Bryce's name. My stomach dropped before he even said what for. "Let's congratulate Bryce for leading the Cascade Logistics project," Martin said, clapping as if he'd just announced a Nobel Prize. Everyone cheered. I sat frozen. That project had been mine. Every late-night call, every negotiation, every deadline I'd met alone. Bryce had barely touched it. I stared at the small gold plaque Martin handed him, the one with my project title engraved on it. Bryce smiled, shaking Martin's hand, and said something about team effort. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I clapped too. Just once. Quietly. Nobody noticed. After the ceremony, people mingled near the bar, laughing over champagne. I slipped outside for air. The evening was cool, the mountains barely visible in the distance. As I stood there, I heard voices around the corner, Martin's loud, confident tone, and a few of the senior managers laughing along. "Sometimes," Martin said, "you have to keep the women humble. Otherwise, they start thinking they run the place." The laughter that followed was sharp and ugly. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there, hidden in the dark, letting the words burn into me. He didn't even care who might hear. To him, this wasn't about work anymore. It was about control. When I finally walked back to my room, I felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger, just a strange calm. I sat down, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen for a long minute. Then I made a new folder. I named it, For HR, in case I disappear. It wasn't dramatic. It was practical. I'd been saving evidence for months, emails, messages, reports. But this time I was going to build something solid. Something that couldn't be twisted. I started with the forged review Tessa gave me. I scanned it, labeled it with the date, and added a short note explaining how it had been found. Then I went through every file on my computer. Every conversation, calendar, invite, project document. Anything that proved what I had done and how they'd taken credit for it. When I found voice recordings from meetings, I added them too. They weren't secret. They were routine recordings from company calls that Martin had conveniently deleted from the shared drive. I'd kept my copies. His own words were enough to show how he dismissed me, how he credited others for my work, how he manipulated evaluations. Hours passed without me noticing. The resort was silent except for the faint noise of a distant party downstairs. I organized every piece of proof, labeled it carefully, and backed it all up on a flash drive I kept in my purse. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. Before shutting down my laptop, I looked at the folder's title again. For HR, in case I disappear. It sounded like something from a mystery novel, but in that moment, it felt necessary. Because now, if they ever tried to erase me again, I'd have the truth. And this time, it was all in my hands. I thought Tessa was the one person I could still trust. She had been careful, quiet, and honest with me before. So one afternoon, while everyone was busy preparing for a client presentation, I told her about the file I was putting together. I didn't give her every detail, but I mentioned that I was collecting proof of what Martin and Dana had done. The fake reviews, the stolen projects, all of it. She looked nervous but nodded. "Be careful," she said softly. I took it as concern, not warning. A few days later, strange things started happening. When I logged into my computer one morning, a red message popped up, access denied. Files that had always been available to me were suddenly locked. At first, I thought it was a system glitch. I asked IT, and they said the change came from upper management. My stomach tightened. I knew what that meant. When I checked the shared drive, I saw that all my notes, the ones where I'd kept details of meetings and project progress, were gone. Entire folders deleted without a trace. The only backups I had were the ones on my personal laptop, which thankfully wasn't connected to the company network. Still, it felt like watching part of my voice disappear. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty folders. I didn't need anyone to tell me who was behind it. Martin didn't do his own dirty work. He made others do it for him. And Tessa had access to those drives. My chest ached with a mix of anger and disbelief. I wanted to believe she wouldn't do it, but I also remembered the look on her face that day. Worried, almost guilty. It wasn't malice. It was fear. Later that afternoon, Martin called me into his office. He was calm, too calm. His voice carried that same mocking politeness he always used when he wanted to humiliate me. "Lauren," he said, closing the door behind me, "I heard you've been keeping extra files. That's not very team-oriented, is it?" I didn't answer. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You should have stayed quiet. Maybe next year you'll learn some humility." The way he said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't advice. It was a threat wrapped in fake charm. I kept my expression steady, pretending his words didn't hit me. Then I turned, opened the door, and walked out without saying a word. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. If they thought this would scare me into silence, they had no idea who they were dealing with. When I reached my car, I sat inside for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel. I could almost hear Martin's smug tone replaying in my head. But instead of breaking down, I took out my keychain. Attached to it was a small flash drive, one I'd bought months ago but never used. I plugged it into my laptop and started copying everything I had left. Emails, scanned files, even small screenshots I'd saved earlier. The process took hours. I sat there in the parking lot, engine off, watching the progress bar move slowly across the screen. The quiet around me felt heavier than usual. I knew I couldn't trust anyone inside that building anymore, not even Tessa. Whatever loyalty I thought existed there was gone. When the transfer finished, I ejected the drive and held it tightly for a second. It was small, barely an inch long, but it felt powerful, a secret they didn't know I still had. I tucked it back into my keychain and started the car. As I drove away, one thought stayed with me. They might have taken my files, but they hadn't taken my proof or my resolve. After what happened with Tessa and the missing files, I stopped trusting anyone completely. At work, I started playing the role they wanted to see. I showed up early, smiled at Martin's comments, laughed when others did, and even brought coffee for the team once in a while. I kept my tone polite, my answers short, and my expression unreadable. From the outside, it looked like I had finally accepted my place. Inside, I was quietly building something much larger than they could imagine. Martin seemed pleased. He'd pass by my desk and say things like, "Good attitude, Lauren," as if I were a student who'd finally learned her lesson. Bryce went back to his lazy routine, assuming I was too tired to fight. Dana ignored me again, which suited me fine. They all thought I was defeated. That was exactly what I wanted them to think. After work, I went home, changed into old clothes, made a cup of tea, and opened my laptop. That's when my real work began. I started putting together a full report, not just about what happened to me, but about everything wrong inside that department. Every lie, every cover-up, every rule they broke. I went through years of data, old messages, meeting notes, and financial records I'd collected over time. I wanted it to be airtight, something no one could dismiss. I kept my notes clean and simple, dates, names, actions, evidence. Slowly, page by page, it grew into something solid. I wasn't just writing about unfair treatment anymore. I was uncovering a pattern, favoritism, fake expense reports, bonuses that didn't match the records. I didn't rush. I knew that one mistake could destroy the whole thing. So I checked everything twice. Sometimes I'd sit in silence for hours, rereading documents to make sure every word matched the truth. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was preparation for justice. No one at work had any idea what I was doing. I stopped talking about office politics altogether. When people gossiped about Martin or complained about workloads, I just nodded, pretending not to care. I didn't mention my flash drive, my folder, or the growing document on my laptop. Even Tessa was kept in the dark this time. Whatever sympathy she'd once shown me didn't matter anymore. Some nights, the exhaustion hit me hard. I'd stare at the screen and think about how much easier it would have been to quit and start fresh somewhere else. But then I remembered that award Bryce accepted in my name, and Martin's voice telling me to learn humility. Those memories kept me going. The document grew to over 100 pages, then more. I added emails showing how Dana changed performance reviews, spreadsheets proving how Martin used fake vendor accounts, and transcripts of meeting notes showing how credit was stolen from employees. Everything was dated and labeled. I even created a summary table that connected each person to their actions. By the end of the third month, it had reached 170 pages. I read it from start to finish and realized it told a complete story. Not just mine, but everyone's who had been silenced. Each night after saving my work, I made a backup on the flash drive hidden inside my car keychain. That tiny piece of metal had become my shield. At the office, Martin still smirked when he saw me, convinced I'd given up. I smiled back every time. If he noticed anything different about me, he never said. He had no idea that every polite nod, every fake smile, was part of the calm before the storm. News about the audit came out on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The email was short and formal, sent from the corporate office. An external HR team would be visiting to review management practices and financial compliance. Most people didn't think much of it, but I saw Dana's face when she read it. Her smile vanished. She got up from her chair and walked straight to Martin's office without saying a word. That told me everything I needed to know. Within an hour, the whole department was tense. People whispered in corners, printers ran nonstop, and the shredder in the back room didn't stop humming all day. It was obvious what they were doing, getting rid of anything that might expose them. I watched quietly as boxes of files disappeared into recycling bins. Bryce made a joke about spring cleaning, but nobody laughed. Martin called an emergency meeting that afternoon. He stood at the front of the room, hands in his pockets, pretending to be calm. "Corporate just wants to check standard procedures," he said. "We have nothing to hide. Still, let's make sure all documents are up to date." His voice had a hard edge under the fake reassurance. Everyone nodded quickly. No one wanted to challenge him. While they scrambled, I sat at my desk and opened the folder on my laptop, the report I had been building for months. Every piece of proof was there. The forged evaluations, fake expense records, screenshots, and emails. I had formatted it neatly, added page numbers, and signed every section with the date and my name. It was ready. I thought about waiting, maybe letting the auditors find things on their own. But I knew Martin and Dana were professionals at hiding evidence. If I stayed silent, they'd probably manipulate their way out again. I couldn't risk that. That evening, after everyone left, I drafted an email to the lead auditor listed in the corporate memo. The message was simple. If you want the truth, please read the attachment before your meeting tomorrow. No emotion, no accusations, just the facts. I attached my full report, checked the file twice, then clicked send. My heart pounded for a few seconds after, but I felt strangely calm. I knew what I had done was right. I shut down my computer, packed my things, and walked out of the building. The office lights glowed behind me like nothing had changed, but I knew something had shifted forever. That night, I couldn't sleep much. I kept replaying everything, Martin's smirk, Dana's lies, the moment they took credit for my work. But instead of feeling angry, I felt steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of them. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I had already requested a personal day, something no one would question. I sat at home with a cup of coffee, my phone on the table, waiting. I didn't know what would happen when they opened that email, but I could imagine the look on their faces when they realized the walls were closing in. By mid-morning, I received a short reply from the auditor. "Thank you for your submission. We'll be in touch." Just 10 words, but they carried more weight than anything Martin had ever said to me. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and let out a deep breath. Whatever came next was out of my hands now. I had done my part, quietly, carefully, and completely. The next morning, I arrived at the office a little later than usual. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel something was different. The whole place was quiet, too quiet. No one was laughing near the coffee machine, no one chatting by the hallway. People were whispering in low voices, eyes darting toward Martin's office. The door to his office was closed, and through the glass I saw 2 people I didn't recognize, both wearing badges with the corporate HR logo. Dana was at her desk, pale and jittery, tapping her pen nonstop. When I said a polite good morning, she didn't answer. She just gave me a quick look, the kind of look someone gives when they're waiting for a bomb to go off. Emails started coming through from corporate about scheduled meetings and review sessions. I didn't have one on my calendar, which told me they already knew where I stood. I kept my head down, pretending to work, though my focus was elsewhere. The sound of footsteps, doors opening and closing, and hushed conversations filled the space. Everyone could sense something serious was happening. Around 11, a man in a gray suit came out of Martin's office carrying a box of documents. Martin followed a few steps behind, trying to keep his composure. He stopped by Dana's desk and whispered something, but she barely nodded. His face was tight, his usual confidence gone. When he looked up, our eyes met for the first time that day. He froze for half a second, then looked away. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. By noon, a company-wide meeting was called in the main conference room. Nobody knew exactly what it was about, but everyone showed up. Corporate HR stood at the front, 3 people in dark suits, calm and professional. One of them introduced herself as the lead investigator. Her tone was firm but polite. "Thank you all for gathering. As you may have heard, the corporate office is conducting an ongoing review of management practices and internal compliance." She paused, scanning the room. Effective immediately, several department heads have been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the projector in the background. Someone shifted in their chair. Then, one by one, the names were read. Dana Wilson, Martin Crane, Bryce Miller. Each name dropped like a stone in water. Dana covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God." Bryce's face turned red. Martin didn't say a word. He stood, straightened his jacket, and tried to act composed, but you could see the defeat in his eyes. 2 security staff appeared near the doorway, waiting. As he walked out, he kept his eyes straight ahead. When he passed by me, he hesitated just a little. His jaw tightened, but he still didn't look directly at me. That small hesitation was enough. It told me he knew exactly how this had happened. No one spoke for a long time after they left. People avoided looking at each other, afraid to show relief or curiosity. The HR investigator thanked everyone for their cooperation and dismissed the meeting. I gathered my notebook and walked out slowly, feeling the weight lift from the air around me. Back at my desk, I sat down and opened my email. There was a new message from corporate sent to all staff. During the ongoing investigation, please direct any concerns or questions to the visiting HR team. We appreciate your professionalism. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. The office still felt tense, but in a different way, like a storm had passed, leaving the air cleaner. For months, they had made me feel powerless, but now the balance had shifted. When I left that day, I saw the security team outside, loading boxes from Martin's office into a company van. I didn't stop to watch. I just walked past them, the faint sound of the door closing behind me marking the end of something that should have ended long ago. That afternoon, while people were still whispering about Martin and Dana being escorted out, I got an email from corporate HR asking me to come to a private meeting. My hands felt a little shaky as I walked down the hall. The same people who once avoided eye contact with me now glanced up as I passed, curious but silent. The meeting was in a small conference room at the end of the floor. 2 representatives from corporate were already there when I arrived, a woman named Ms. Grant and a man named Eric. Both looked serious, but their faces weren't cold. Ms. Grant stood and gestured for me to sit. "Lauren, thank you for coming," she said. "We'd like to talk to you about something important." I sat down across from them, unsure what to expect. Ms. Grant opened a folder filled with printed pages, each stamped and labeled. My chest tightened when I realized they were from my report. The one I had sent quietly, the one that had started all of this. She looked at me carefully and said, "We reviewed everything you sent. What you provided was incredibly detailed. It helped us uncover issues that go far beyond what anyone imagined." I didn't speak. I just listened as she continued. She explained that my evidence had revealed not only falsified reviews and unethical management, but also something bigger: years of financial fraud. Martin and Dana had approved fake client accounts to move money around. Some employees were denied bonuses because those funds had been redirected. Even the regional records showed manipulation. Eric leaned forward and said, "You've done something very few people have the courage to do. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You protected others too. Because of your report, the company avoided a serious legal risk." For a moment, I couldn't respond. I had prepared for this for months, but hearing it said out loud felt unreal. I had imagined this moment in so many ways, but now it just felt quiet. Ms. Grant went on, "The executive board has reviewed your performance history and your documentation. They agree that you should be recognized for your integrity and your work. We'd like to offer you the promotion you were originally denied, and a new position leading a compliance division here at headquarters." The words hung in the air. It was everything I had once wanted, but now it felt different. I thought about all the late nights, the fear, the silence I'd kept to survive. A promotion didn't erase what happened, but it meant I could finally change how things worked. I nodded slowly. "I'll take it," I said quietly. "But we do things differently now." Ms. Grant smiled a little, understanding what I meant. "That's exactly why we want you in that role." They handed me a formal offer letter. I signed it without hesitation. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance finally being restored. Before I left the room, Ms. Grant said, "Lauren, we'll be doing a full audit of every department. Your report started a much-needed cleanup." I thanked her and stepped out into the hallway. The air felt lighter. The same place that once made me feel small now felt different, as if the walls had shifted. People were talking softly again, but their tone had changed, cautious, respectful. When I reached my desk, I packed a few things into my bag. My old nameplate sat there, scratched and faded. I looked at it one last time before leaving it behind. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed Martin's empty office. The blinds were open, the desk cleared, the walls bare. I paused for a second, not out of nostalgia, but to remind myself how far I'd come. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, ready to start again, not as the woman they tried to silence, but as the one who rewrote the story they never wanted told. A few months passed, and life at the company felt almost unrecognizable. The people who once whispered in fear now worked freely, without watching over their shoulders. Meetings were calmer, fair, and respectful. I could walk through the halls without feeling that heavy tension that used to hang in the air. I had moved to a different floor now, the top level, where my new office was located. The glass walls looked out over the city skyline, and sunlight spilled across my desk each morning. I didn't decorate much. I liked things simple. The space itself already felt like a statement. My team was made up of some familiar faces and a few new ones. The same co-workers who once stayed quiet during Martin's rule now answered directly to me. They worked harder, spoke up, and shared ideas without fear of being mocked or ignored. Watching them change reminded me why I had done all of this in the first place. Bryce was long gone. Word spread that he had taken another job in another state after his involvement came to light. Dana had been dismissed quietly after the investigation proved her part in the falsified documents. Martin's situation was much worse. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I couldn't ignore the irony either. The man who told me to learn humility was now under federal investigation for embezzlement. Reports said the fraud had gone on for years, hidden under layers of fake invoices and bogus vendor accounts. Every once in a while, I would get an email from someone in another branch thanking me for what I'd done. They said things were finally changing for the better across the company. That meant more to me than the promotion itself. It felt like the damage he caused was slowly being repaired. On my first official day in the new office, I came in early, before anyone else. I wanted a moment alone. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the city below. I sat down, opened the top drawer of my desk, and placed my old flash drive inside. It was the same one I had kept on my car keychain for months, the one that held all my evidence. I turned it over in my hand before setting it down. To anyone else, it was just a small piece of metal, but to me, it carried every hour of fear, patience, and persistence. It reminded me how close I came to walking away, and how choosing to stay changed everything. As I closed the drawer, I heard a soft knock on the door. It was a young intern, new to the department. She looked nervous, holding a folder too tightly. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "I just wanted to ask, how did you get here? I mean, how did you become the head of this division?" I smiled, not the polite kind I used to fake in meetings, but a genuine one. I thought for a moment before answering. "By never letting them decide my worth again," I said simply. Her eyes widened a little, and she nodded slowly, as if she understood more than I expected. She thanked me and left the room quietly. After she was gone, I looked around the office once more. The sun had risen higher, casting light across the framed company logo on the wall. For the first time in years, the place felt peaceful. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was finally honest. I leaned back in my chair, letting that calm sink in. My story had started with silence and ended with truth. And as I sat there, I knew that the best revenge I could ever have wasn't power or recognition. It was rebuilding something stronger than what they tried to destroy. Do you think I did the right thing by standing my ground and walking away from the people who tried to break me? Or should I have given them another chance to change? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.